This is part 7. In the last part, we have started discussing two sections of the Negotiable Instrument Act, namely Section 8, which defines holder, and Section 9, which defines holder in due course. At the time of discussing holder, we have learned the holder of a promissory note, bill of exchange or check means any person entitled in his own name to the possession thereof and to receive or recover the amount due thereon from the parties thereto. So he is entitled to have a possession, and there you must, by this time understood, it's the legal possession and not the physical possession. But he is entitled to have, and not only that he is entitled to have, but then he has possession thereof and to receive or recover the amount due thereon from the parties thereto, that we have dealt with. Then further part of the section says where the note, bill or check is lost or destroyed, its holder is the person so entitled at the time of such loss or destruction. So that is, we have dealt with section 8 of the Negotiable Instrument Act defining holder. Then we started discussing section 9 of the Negotiable Instrument Act, which deals with holder in due course. And when we started understanding this concept of holder in due course, there we learned holder in due course means any person who for consideration. Now we have not worked out, because I told you it's not necessary, but as a negotiable instrument, maybe promissory note, bill of exchange or check, or is a contract. And hence when you talk about consideration, the adequacy of the consideration, it may be adequate, it may be inadequate, it may be past, it may be present, it may be whatever may be the consideration, there must be consideration. And with which you shall be dealing as far as the concept of consideration is concerned, which must be lawful, or for example, the nature should not be opposed to public policy. All these details with which you have already dealt, as far as the Indian Contract Act is concerned, that is the presumption. Otherwise it may be necessary, I will have a passing reference to it, no doubt about it, but may not be possible for me. Only first ingredient is that holder in due course means a person who for consideration. So he has got a negotiable instrument, or the negotiable instrument is negotiated to him, or he gets a negotiable instrument, he receives the negotiable instrument for consideration. So he becomes what? He became the possessor. So means any person who for consideration became the possessor of a promissory note, bill of exchange or check, if payable to bearer, or the payee or endorsee thereof, if payable to the order. This is one part. So in case in case of holder, the person who is entitled to have possession. So as we have dealt with it, the holder of a promissory note, bill of exchange or check means any person entitled in his own name. Here the person must have possession. Unless he has got possession, this is a comparison between holder and holder in due course. In case when a person wants to claim that he is holder in due course, he must have possession of the negotiable instrument. And when he should have possession, he should have possession before the amount mentioned in it become payable. In other words, what is the meaning of it? The meaning of it is that this ingredient tells us that he must have got instrument before the maturity of the instrument. And then the last part, which says, as I told you yesterday, and without having sufficient cause to believe that any defect existed in the title of the person from whom he derived his title. So now, with this now, we want to understand as to when, what do you mean by maturity, of a negotiable instrument. And in order to understand maturity of a negotiable instrument, the first section to which I want to draw your attention is section 19, which says a promissory note or a bill of exchange in which no time for payment is specified and a check are payable on demand. Now, during the course of this introductory lecture, there is a passing reference to some of the provisions with which you are not dealt, with which we shall be dealing during course of time. But as it is a must for me to make mention of some of the provisions. For example, when we talk about check is always, refresh your memory as far as the definition of check is concerned. Check is always payable on demand. So the check, in case of a check, it is, it as soon as it is issued, it is, payable. But then, what is the banking practice? When we will work out details as far as the check is concerned, with which we shall be dealing, from 1st of April 2012, Reserve Bank of India has issued a circular, and as per that circular, now the check can remain into circulation, or check is required to be presented within a period of 3 months, which was in the past 6 months. So though check is always payable on demand, so this is in context or reference to what? The banking practice and the Banking Regulation Act, as per which, as per section 35A, the circular is drawn, with which we shall be dealing in detail. Yes, yet we have not worked out details as far as the check is concerned, only we have dealt with some part as far as the definition is concerned. Yes, we will continue our discussion. But then, in case of a promissory note or in case of a bill of exchange, what is the manner in which you can draw it? There must be a certainty of payment, no doubt about it. But you can draw a promissory note which is payable at sight. You can draw a promissory note which is payable after sight. You can draw a promissory note on presentment, or you can draw a promissory note which is payable on demand, with which we shall be dealing, or you can draw a promissory note which is payable after 8 days. You can draw a promissory note which is payable after 1 month. You can draw a promissory note which is payable after 1 year. You can draw a promissory note which is payable after happening of a certain event which is bound to take place, for which there is time may be different, but there is bound to be certainty, with which we have dealt to certain extent. So now this is a section 19 is one. There are many sections to which we will have a reference at the time of discussing this concept. But then the section 19 says a promissory note or bill of exchange in which no time. So you read a promissory note in which no time for payment is mentioned, specified. Then in that case, and a check are payable on demand. Check is always payable. In case of a check, the question of writing down time doesn't arise, because that is as per the definition of a check is always pay. It is in the negative form. What is check? Check is a bill of exchange drawn on a specified banker, not expressed to be payable otherwise than on demand, which means it is payable on demand. Yes, check is always payable on demand. But imagine a situation where A draws check today, and instead of writing down today's date, he has written a date of a future date is mentioned, maybe after 2 months or 3 months. He has written date from February as far as 2013 is concerned. Then in that case, that is not at all a valid check as far as section 6 is concerned. But if you draw a check today and write down today's date on the check, such a check, even though payable on demand, can remain into circulation, or that will be honored by the banker namely banker will carry out payment with respect to such a check when it is presented to the banker within a period of 3 months. So this is as far as the check is concerned. In case of promissory note, or in case of bill of exchange, what is the manner in which it can be drawn or it is made payable, with which we shall be dealing as we start right from section 21. So in order to know maturity of a negotiable instrument, namely a promissory note and bill of exchange, the sections that we have to deal with are right from section 21 up to section 25 of the Negotiable Instrument Act. Out of these sections now, if you draw, as I mean section 21 says, in a promissory note or bill of exchange, the expressions at sight and on presentment means on demand. So when you say I promise to pay, or A has written a promissory note, I promise to pay B 10,000 rupees at sight, or I promise to pay B 10,000 on presentment. Now this is applicable. When I say promissory note, it goes without saying that is applicable to a bill of exchange, but there is a clear-cut distinction with which you are dealt. In case of promissory note, there is an unconditional undertaking, whereas in case of bill of exchange, there is an unconditional order. That is the only. But otherwise, it can be drawn payable at sight, it can be payable on presentment. And then the expression after sight. So at sight and on presentment means on demand. So whenever there is a demand with respect to it, that is, it is payable on demand. And the further part of section 21 says the expression after sight. The expression after sight means in a promissory note after presentment for sight. So it is required to be cited, that is required to be presented, there must be presentment for sight. And in a bill of exchange after acceptance. Yet I have not dealt with the procedure with which we shall be dealing as far as the bill of exchange is concerned. First of all, bill of exchange is required to be presented for the purpose of acceptance, and then it is presented for the purpose of payment. In case of promissory note, the question of presentment for acceptance doesn't arise. It is required to be presented for the purpose of payment. So in case you come across a promissory note where the expression after sight, what is the meaning of it? After sight means in a promissory note after presentment for sight, and in a bill of exchange after acceptance, or noting for non-acceptance or protest for non-acceptance. Now these are the terms with which we shall be dealing, or we will come across in a case where the negotiable instrument, namely it is dishonored. Then there is a procedure which is required to be followed, with which we shall be dealing right from section 99 onwards. Yes, we will learn that, no doubt about it. But here, try to understand the meaning as per the heading suggests: at sight, on presentment, and after sight. Then the section 22 says, the maturity of a promissory note or bill of exchange is the date on which it falls due. So when it becomes mature, it says the maturity of a promissory note or bill of exchange is the date at which it falls due. So that you have to read the promissory note and then or a bill of exchange and find out when it falls due. In other words, when payee or the person who is having it with him has got right to recover the amount. It's not that he can recover the amount as and when he likes. No. If the promissory note is payable after 1 year, he can get the amount only after 1 year, subject to certain points with which we shall be dealing as we proceed further. So now that is the day when it falls due. When it falls due, that is the when you talk about what is maturity. The maturity of a promissory note or bill of exchange is the date at which it falls due. So when it becomes mature, the you can claim payment with respect. Who can claim payment with respect to it? A draws a negotiable instrument in favor of B, and B has passed it on to Mr. C, C to Mr. D, D to Mr. E, E to Mr. F, F to Mr. G. So now this Mr. G, what is the manner in which it is required to be negotiated, with which we shall be dealing as we start understanding the procedural aspect of the Negotiable Instrument Act, no doubt about it. But then, being the negotiable instrument, G has got right to get the amount when it falls due, namely when it becomes mature. That is one thing. So he reads, he reads the negotiable instrument, and he will come to know when it becomes mature. That is the point of time at which it is possible for him to claim the amount from the parties. As in case, for example, in case of a promissory note, he will go to the maker and claim the amount. In case of a bill of exchange, he will go to an acceptor and claim amount with respect, because it is a direction which is given by the drawer to whom? To the drawee, and drawee becomes an acceptor when he has accepted the bill of exchange. So he will go to him and get payment with respect to the same. But then this is, as you go on understanding what is maturity and why we are trying to understand maturity, a person can become a holder in due course provided he has received the negotiable instrument or he has got the negotiable instrument. So when you want to claim that you are holder in due course of the negotiable instrument, there are many rights and privileges which follow as far as when a person becomes a holder in due course, with which we shall be dealing. Yes. But then, to become a holder in due course, you must receive the negotiable instrument. You must have a negotiable instrument, depending upon the nature, whether it is bearer or it is order, but you must have it. When you must get it before maturity. So this is the time for us to understand as to what is the maturity, and then the maturity of a promissory note or bill of exchange is the date at which it falls due. But then the same section, namely section 22, makes mention of a provision of days of grace. Provision regarding days of grace is applicable as far as the next part of section 22. If you read it, it says, every promissory note or bill of exchange which is not expressed to be payable on demand. So this is in the negative form. Every promissory note or bill of exchange which is not expressed to be payable on demand, at sight, on presentment, is at maturity on the third day after the day on which it is expressed to be payable. So provision regarding days of grace is not applicable when promissory note or bill of exchange is payable at sight, when it is payable on demand, and it is payable on presentment. The days of provision regarding days of grace is not applicable, and if it is not payable on demand, at sight, on presentment, is at maturity. When it becomes mature, is at maturity on the third day. It is at maturity on the third day after the day on which it is expressed to be payable. So when it is expressed to be payable, in that case you have to add 3 days of grace, and then it will become mature on that particular day. And then how to calculate maturity of a bill? So might well, provision regarding days of grace is not at all applicable as far as the check is concerned, because the check is always payable on demand. But the provision regarding days of grace is applicable in case of a promissory note or bill of exchange which is not payable on demand, which is not payable at sight, or which is not payable on presentment. Yes, that is a provision. And then the further part of the section, as we proceed further, section 23. What is section 23? Section 23 has laid down a provision for calculating maturity of a bill or note payable so many months after date or sight. So when a negotiable instrument is payable so many months after date or sight, that is promissory note. Now we are, remember this, that we are concerned only with promissory note and bill of exchange. And say section 23 says, in calculating, whenever you want to calculate the date at which a promissory note or bill of exchange made payable at stated number of months after date. So when it is made payable after certain number of months after date or after sight, or after a certain event, is at maturity. So it is payable after a few months after certain event. When it is at maturity, the period stated shall be held to terminate on the day of months which corresponds with the day on which the instrument is dated, or presented for acceptance or sight, or noted for non-acceptance, or protested for non-acceptance, or event happens, or where the instrument is a bill of exchange made payable a stated number of months after sight and has been accepted for honor with the day on which it was so accepted. If the month in which the period would terminate has no corresponding day, the period shall be held to terminate on the last day of such month. The time for you to remember the instructions which were given by me. Always have a bare act of the law that you are learning or trying to understand, and then along with the section, if you go through the illustrations which are given, that will definitely serve the purpose from the point of view of understanding the ingredients of the section. Now after section 23, you have to calculate maturity, and now it says a negotiable instrument dated 29 January 1878. Now I am reading the illustration as it is given so that there should not be any confusion. But then a negotiable instrument dated 29th of January 1878 is made payable 1 month after date. So it is made payable 1 month after 29th of January. Now the instrument is at maturity on the third day after the 28th February. So February it is made payable on what? It is dated 29th of January. February, when you, barring leap year, you have got only 28 days. So 28 is the last corresponding day of the month as far as February is concerned, and hence from you have to calculate third day after 28th of February, and then that is, it will become mature on third day after 28th of February. Second illustration says a negotiable instrument dated 38th August is made payable 3 months after date. So 38th August is the date that appears on it and is made payable 3 months after date, this particular date, namely 38th August. Now the instrument is at maturity on 3rd of December. Why? August to September, October, November, and 1, 2, 3. So 38th of November from there, 1st, 2nd and 3rd. So it will become mature on 3rd of December. A promissory note or bill of exchange dated 31st August is made payable 3 months after date. The instrument is at maturity on the 3rd December, because August to September, October and November. First it will be mature on the last date. It will, you have to calculate this as far as the last date of November, and then you have to start counting days of grace, because these are the instruments which are not payable on demand, at sight or on presentment, but these are instruments to which the provision regarding days of grace is made applicable. So this is when the negotiable instrument is made payable after certain months or after certain days, certain days, or after happening of a few days after happening of a certain event. What is the manner in which maturity is required to be calculated is made very clear as far as section 23 is concerned. Now section 24 deals with what? Calculating maturity of a bill or note payable so many days after date or sight. So now section 24 says, whenever in calculating the date at which a promissory note or bill of exchange made payable a certain number of days after date or after sight or after a certain event is at maturity. So how is the negotiable instrument is drawn? The negotiable instrument, namely promissory note or bill of exchange, is made payable a certain number of days after date or after sight or after certain event is at maturity. So such a negotiable instrument is at maturity the day of the date or of presentment for acceptance or sight or protest for acceptance or on which the event happens shall be excluded. So that particular day is required to be excluded. Which day is required to be excluded? The day of the date, the date that appears, or of presentment for acceptance or sight or of protest for non-acceptance. I do understand that at present you are not familiar with this terminology, namely non-acceptance or presentment for acceptance, and such are the terms, but be familiar with it. Try, if you are familiar with it, during course of time you will start understanding. For that you need some patience, and hence this is an enactment where unless you know the entire law, it may not be possible for you to know say that you have got mastery over the law. That is bound to take some time. So have patience. Start learning along with, as I go on telling the provisions, start reading yourself. For that you can read any book, for which I don't have any objection, but read in the manner in which I am telling you, so it becomes very easy for you to understand the provisions with which we are dealing. So now it says, section 24 says, calculating maturity of a bill or note payable so many days after date or sight, and what is required? That shall be excluded. What shall be excluded? The day of the date or of presentment for acceptance or sight or of protest for non-acceptance or on which the event happens. So if it is made payable 10 days after a particular event happens, the day on which the event happens is required to be excluded, shall be excluded accordingly. So there is, and you have to start counting the days from the next day onwards. With this now, there are cases where the maturity of the negotiable instrument is on a public holiday. So what is the law? And then section 25 says, when the day of maturity is a holiday, when the day of maturity is a holiday, section 25 says, when the day on which a promissory note, when the day on which a promissory note or bill of exchange is at maturity is a public holiday, the instrument shall be deemed to be due on the next preceding business day. So it is, I mean, generally when you talk about law, maybe I mean, I will draw your attention to limitation. Yes, with which I mean the Limitation Act of 1963. Yes, there when it happens that the last day, that day becomes that is a public holiday. In that case, naturally you can go to the court on the next working day. But as far as Negotiable Instrument Act is concerned, it says the instrument shall be deemed to be due on next preceding business day. And then the explanation to the section says the expression public holiday. Which is public holiday? The expression public holiday includes Sundays and any other day declared by the central government by notification in the official gazette to be a public holiday. So which can be a public holiday? Only that can be a public holiday which is notified by the central government in the official gazette as per say explanation as far as section 25 is concerned. So this is for the purpose of knowing maturity. So you want to become a holder in due course, or a person wants to become a holder in due course, he must, as we have learned, that he must have got negotiable instrument for, he must have become possession, he must become a possessor of a negotiable instrument for consideration. That is one thing. Secondly, he must get the negotiable instrument before maturity. Now, as far as maturity is concerned, or how long a negotiable instrument can remain into circulation, yes, till I mean it becomes mature or the payment is carried out, where with which we shall be dealing, and there are many more aspects. But in this we will continue as far as next part of our the lecture series on the Negotiable Instrument Act is concerned.